Hello, my name is Tammy License, and I am the Title IV Part A Student Support and Academic Enrichment Program Manager at the Office of Public Instruction. Today, I will be demonstrating the steps to complete the Title IV-A application pages that are part of the ESSA Consolidated Application. If you have questions or need support while completing your application, please reach out to me at tamra.license@mt.gov or by phone at 406-444-0829. To begin, I'm going to go to the Title IV Part A webpage so that you can see valuable resources that are available as you work on your application and learn more about Title IV Part A. One of the first things is there is a fact sheet on this page that will give you some information about basic programs and activities that can be funded with Title IV Part A funds. You can also find links to the T4PA Center website. This is our Technical Assistance Center for Title IV Part A. There's also some non-regulatory guidance, statute, and other things you might need from the Department of Education when you're learning about Title IV Part A. You can also use this page if you are looking to use the Department of Education's needs assessment tool. That's linked here. You are also permitted to use your own needs assessment tool if you are one of those schools that's over 30,000. Additionally, you can use this page to find resources and information on topics that are the categories for Title IV Part A, such as safe and healthy students. There's a link with resources and tools and information there. Well-rounded education programs, and the effective use of technology category. So be sure to check out those links and those colored buttons at the bottom of the Title IV Part A webpage to help you learn more. Also, to help you with your eGrants application, we have posted the grant deadlines for Title IV Part A, which is part of ESSA, and so it's a grant that ends on September 30th, so here are some deadlines to keep in mind. I have also created a Google Doc that has instructions for this year's Title IV Part A eGrants application. You can access those right here at this link. Something to note, if it doesn't pop up automatically, there's a nice index or an outline for this document that can really help you if you want to navigate to a certain question. So for example, you can, as I just showed, you can kind of click on this outline button, and if you had a question about indirect costs, it'll take you to that. Question about the needs assessment. So it's nice it has this little index to help you navigate to what you need specifically. So we will eventually update those in eGrants, but for now, this Google Doc is linked on Title IV, and it's a great way to help you navigate through all of that new information if you're not an auditory learner. So my video today now will take you through these instructions as I work through an eGrants test application example. So I'm signed in here. I've already gone through the eGrants Access Select menu. This is a sample application for Helena Elementary, since I live in Helena now. And so I'm going to start out by navigating, once I've opened the ESSA Consolidated, which Jack has a great webinar, and we have our training to show you all those tools, you're going to select the Title IV Part A Student Support and Academic Enrichment pages. So you'll know you're in the right pages. They have brown color at the top. So this first page is the overview page that just provides some of that similar information to what is on the website, but also just any statutory legislation and other guidance you might need to look at. So if you want to access those, it just tells you the basic overview. Next tab would be the Program Detail tab. So you'll select the Program Detail tab, and this will tell you how much funding you have available. And in this case, there's $126,465 available. Helena is a larger district, so it does have an indirect cost rate. If you do not have indirect, if there's a zero showing here, there's nothing here. You will just want to make sure you include a 0 in this box, that you are not going to be budgeting for indirect costs. So the indirect costs, they do come off of what we would consider the category funding. Down here for well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and the effective use of technology. So it's important that we separate those costs if you are going to take, for example, in this case, they could take up to $5,342 for indirect costs. So it's important that we kind of set those aside so that they are not part of your percentage calculations. So this is a school district that has a funding profile of over 30,000. So they are required to follow what we call the 20/20 sum rule. And so they will have to put a minimum of 20% in well-rounded education, a minimum of 20% in safe and healthy students, and a minimum percent of 1% in effective use of technology. So I would put in those minimums just as an example, just so they could kind of see and use the calculate. If I calculate totals, this will tell them the minimum they have to spend in each of those categories. So 25,293, they're welcome to spend more. And in fact, when you go to save this page, these three percentages need to add up to 100%. Now notice if I were to take off $1,000 for the indirect costs, that will change the distribution amounts. So because there's less money now from the original 126,000 to be distributed, there's now 125,000 being distributed by category. So it does alter that slightly. You'll notice right now I've allocated 41%, and so I've only allocated $51,000. So I need to make sure this adds up to 100%. Keeping in mind that with some rounding error with percentages, it might be $1 more or $1 less when we calculate this indirect or when you calculate your totals. So you kind of have to account for that within $1 when you're actually doing your budget, because the well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and effective use of technology totals on this page are going to need to match on your budget page. So I'm gonna do 40% just as a example, 40% for safe and healthy students, and that would leave 20% for the effective use of technology category. So I'm gonna hit calculate totals. I haven't saved anything at this point, so now you'll notice that I'm currently taking 0 indirects, so I have 126,465, and that total did come correct. For example, again, if I were to say I'm gonna take $4,000 of indirects, and if I hit calculate totals, it's now distributing a smaller amount to each category for the buckets. And so when I go to do my budget, I will be budgeting for the 122,465. So what I would suggest is you may want to take a screenshot of this page so that you remember what you put here. You can also come back and do this page after you've done your budget if you haven't already looked at what the costs you're anticipating are for well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, or the effective use of technology. So this page and the budget page are really closely tied together. In fact, this year, your well-rounded education for budgeted funds has to be within $1, maybe $1 more or $1 less of this amount. Just because of some rounding error, you may have to subtract $1 if the total somehow rounded up higher or lower. But that's just something to keep in mind when you're planning for your budget, that you might want to do your budget pages and come back, but when you go to do your consistency check, these percentages, these total amounts for each category and bucket do need to align with what you budget in each category. And you will be doing, moving forward, cash requests will be identified by that well-rounded, safe and healthy, or effective use of technology. So that will help us all with federal reporting and tracking those funds by each bucket or category. The other thing to keep in mind is with that 15% cap on infrastructure, and it only applies to this 24,000 in this case. So I'm gonna put a number here. If I'm not gonna do any devices, equipment, or software in that category, I can put 0. In this case, I'm gonna put 15%. And so that is saying that I can spend 3,674 of this 24,000 on devices and infrastructure. And again, that only applies to this effective use of technology category. And if there is a waiver for that, we'll let you know. But this is just something to manually keep track of it and to give you an estimate or an amount based on your spending in that category of how much can be used on infrastructure. So the next part, I've hit calculate totals, and I've distributed my funds, and I did leave some indirect. Again, you might want to do a screen capture of this page or plan to kind of navigate back and forth, but it's hard to save the budget pages when they're not, if you haven't spent all the money. So I would just suggest maybe doing a screen capture of what you're estimating here, so that when you do your budget pages, or doing your budget page first and then coming back and figuring out if you ended up taking all of the indirect. Also keeping in mind that if you take property and equipment, which is that 700 line item, that indirects cannot be taken on that 700 category. So down here you'll see allowable uses. So you'll want to check based on your programs how you're going to be spending that 48,000 nearly $50,000. So if you're going to be doing some STEM activities or maybe some social emotional learning programs and perhaps other student success and engagement programs and activities, you'll want to check those boxes. For your safe and healthy students activities, you might be planning for some parental involvement activities, maybe some suicide prevention, trauma-informed classroom training, and other safe and healthy students. Maybe you're doing violence prevention. So you can check as many as you want here. When you check these boxes, it will make it so the next page populates with a box so you can describe in more detail your Title IV Part A programs in each of those areas. For your technology, 85% of these funds are going to be typically used on professional development or salaries maybe for someone to provide additional tech support. So I'm going to put that we're going to be doing professional development and use of technology. We are going to buy a little bit of equipment and devices for that. And so I could either put professional learning tools if they were going to be used by the teachers for that professional development, or I might put infrastructure if it's going to be a student device. Maybe we just need a little bit of equipment around the school to bring our main infrastructure up to capacity. So I'll make sure I hit save page. So it says the page is not saved due to the following errors. A save change in funding. I'm going to save page again. If that comes up, that did get rid of the error. I'm not sure why I had to save twice, but sometimes you do have to click things twice in eGrants. All right, next I'm going to go on to my program objectives page. So again, I did have funds because this is a district over 30,000. I do have funds in both well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and effective use of technology. The other box that pops up on this page is that needs assessment statutory requirement. So for this case, this is a school that has to spend in all three areas and also has a needs assessment. If you are an award under 30,000, this page that populates for program detail, program objectives, might only include one box. It might only, if you're spending 100% in well-rounded education, it might only populate with that box. And you might have two boxes, depends on how you've distributed your funds on the previous page, but this page is actually populated based on the check boxes. So if you have funds in an area, but you did not check a box in that area, you would need to go back and make sure you've checked the box for the bucket, either well-rounded, safe and healthy, or effective use of technology. For this first box and all the boxes, you're going to describe the programs and activity that support the category, making sure you know any community partnerships, make sure you include your program's objectives and the intended outcomes, and how you're going to be evaluating the effectiveness of these programs based on those objectives and outcomes. So there is not a 500 count minimum on these, but it is important just to keep in mind that you are thorough and explain your programs. Please do not just list things you plan to buy. It should be programs and activities of what your goals are and how these programs are going to be evaluated for effectiveness, what your outcomes are for students. So please make sure it's not just a quick list of a few things you want to buy, that it is describing your programs and activities. For the needs assessment box, you are required, if you're over 30,000, to conduct that needs assessment at least once every 3 years. And so that is helpful to have the date of when that occurred, who attended that discussion. It should not be 1 or 2 people at the district level having that needs assessment. It should be comprehensive and involve stakeholders in either the survey questions, if it's a parent and community survey, school board members, other community partnerships and programs, but making sure that you let us know which stakeholders attended, what data you use to make and inform your decisions for Title IV Part A, and what the results of your assessment were. So what your decisions you made. And that may be addressed above, and you are also welcome to share with me if you've used the U.S. Department of Ed needs assessment tool or your own needs assessment tool. Please feel free to email me kind of that document. If it's longer, won't fit here in this 2,000 count maximum. But here you're really just doing a basic summary of that needs assessment, and as part of monitoring, you might be asked to later show that document and give more information on background information on your needs assessment process. So I'm not going to save this page today because I have not completed this information for this school district, but if you have questions or need support with completing this section, you can look at the previous year's application, recognizing that you may need to add more details and more information. and that it could be returned if it's vague, short, a list of items. And so keep that in mind, that we do want a good explanation here of what your program looks like, what you're planning to achieve with that program, and how you're evaluating it. The next tab under the program detail would be the end of year reporting. So this page is important as part of monitoring, to know what your programs and activities look like in the previous school year. So you can check with your, you can reference your previous school year's application. You can look to see if you actually spent funds that way if you're new to the district. But you should be able to figure out and report on what you did with your funds in the previous school year. If there was a change in activities that wasn't done through an amendment, perhaps due to the current COVID school closures that happened last spring, and you weren't able to conduct maybe professional development or some of the student programs you'd planned, please make sure in this section that you make a note of how maybe your programs or activities changed due to that crisis. Also, making sure what measures you're using to evaluate the effectiveness of your programs, so that there's a range of those, and there are some tools we have available to help you figure out how to evaluate the effectiveness of your programs. It shouldn't be just statements like, I think it went really well, but there should be some data to inform these decisions. Sometimes it's hard to tell within 1 year of implementation if it's been successful, but long term you should be evaluating the effectiveness of those programs, and there should be somewhat based on data and measurable tools, but depending on what type of program you're doing, you can use, it should somewhat tie back to your needs assessment. If you identified a need, how is this program impacting that need? And I know a lot of Title IV Part A, especially under safe and healthy students, it's hard sometimes to measure effectiveness of one individual program because of the complexities there, but if you need help with this evaluate program step, please reach out to Tammy. That's me. All right, and that kind of goes to, the measures might be what tools you're using, but this is the next one where you'd really describe, are the programs effective? Is there a more effective program available? Again, Title IV Part A shouldn't necessarily be just one-time items, so it should be ongoing ways you're looking to improve that program for the future, or make changes and implement the program in a way that is effective in impacting students in your community. And so when you're finished, you'll save page. The next pages you're going to navigate to are the budget pages. So this page populates from the main ESEA consolidated pages. So here I have not saved for Helena. So I would want to make sure if I were working on the Title IV Part A pages that I did navigate back to the main ESEA ESSA consolidated private non-public school participation tab, and navigating to the Title IV equitable share. Helena does have some private school students, so I'm going to estimate, but again, this hasn't been populated because the pages for the public school students have not been inputted here. But so if I were to make sure I have my participating enrollment data, that will help me identify. And once I save this page, and sometimes you have to hit calculate and save twice on this page to make it all work, but that will help populate my Title IV Part A page of the first budget page. So also keep in mind, if you have a proportional equitable share here for Title IV Part A, you are responsible for making sure in the budget that that is identified as the private school share. So on the budget detail page, it will tell us what, if you've had any amounts paid to date, and the current amount budgeted by object code. So the budget detail page, as I mentioned, if you had a private school equitable share, you're going to want to make sure in the description you note that perhaps you are doing a suicide prevention curriculum for your private school, so for private school. So making sure you've noted, and if their equitable share was $1,500, that line item is $1,500. So the new things with this, you might notice this budget looks different than the past, but it is similar to other budgets we've used at OPI. So the first one you're going to want to select is the object code. So if this was a suicide prevention curriculum, that would probably be under, maybe it was a purchased professional and technical, or you paid for a training. And this would be under safe and healthy students, but this is professional development. And so safe and healthy students would be the use of funds category. So the main thing, you've always had to identify the object code and the purpose category. And there is a document here linking the description of those purpose categories and object codes if you have a question. really the new thing is that there's this use of funds drop down where you categorize each line item by one of those safe and healthy students, well-rounded education, or effective use of technology categories. And so again, this is where it comes in, where you'd want to keep track of what you said you were going to spend so that the totals will match up. You won't see it here on the budget pages, but it will come up when you go to submit. If your safe and healthy students totals do not equal the percentages, you'll either need to modify your budget or modify the allowable uses tab. So here I've done this line item for safe and healthy students. Previously you had to do the budget detail, which was the numerical amounts, and the description was separate. So it's really nice, it's just one page, you categorize the funds and you describe it here. And so if I wanted to, if I had more than 5 line items, I can create additional entries from the drop down, and that creates 5 more, it looks like. I can hit calculate totals, and that will actually help me figure out how much I've spent here. I've spent $1,500. Remember, on the previous allowable uses page, I believe said I was going to spend $4,000 of indirect, so I'm going to budget that indirect so I don't forget about that. I'm going to hit calculate totals again. So now you'll see I have my indirect costs budgeted. I have some purchased professional and technical services budgeted, and then I haven't done anything else. So this is where, again, you'll want to make sure, let's say you were going to pay, you've increased and added maybe a career pathways advisor that is a new person that does, maybe it's a 0.4 FTE for these personnel services and salaries. So if I'm going to add that, they're providing support services with that career and technical advisor. And I can't even remember what I checked. That wasn't what I checked. I know that. But so they would be under well-rounded education. So I might just say a CTE, career pathways advisor. And let's say that person costs, I remember I had 50,000 or so in that. So let's say that person costs about $40,000. And so remembering that for any personal services and salaries, I need to have benefits for that person. So now I'm going to make sure under well-rounded that I have the pathways advisor. So I will say CTE, career pathways benefits. And making sure that I wouldn't just put in 10,000, but I'm going to, because I can't remember the number I put. But I'd want to make sure that this number and this number, because this is my well-rounded, if this was my one expenditure for well-rounded education, it is going to have to be within $1 of whatever I had put on the previous page. So remembering too that it won't let you save. And this is a little tricky here. It's saying I have indirect costs above the maximum allowable because I have not budgeted my full 126,000. I now have only spent 55,000. So the percentage I currently can spend on indirect, I'm above that. So it's until the funds are all budgeted. So I'm just gonna do, I've done some safe and healthy students. I might throw in some supplies for safe and healthy students. Maybe we're going to, I said we're going to do some more suicide prevention. So that was the suicide prevention training for the private school. So I might say this is suicide prevention materials for, I don't need to say public school because anything unless it's identified for the private school is for the public school. And so let's say these cost about $3,000. Some other items, I'm just going to throw in a couple things. Remembering too, if you do put in property and equipment. So let's say for property and equipment, I was going to buy we had one school buy a science table. So if I'm going to buy a cool science tech, like a touch screen and animatage table, I believe they bought. So let's say they bought a science table, and I've already spent my well-rounded up here. So I'm going to now say this career pathways advisor is maybe a safe and healthy students. We've added maybe a counselor. And so that I'm going to say now is 20,000. And so my benefits would be 20% of that, so closer now to 4,000. So that I can do a science table here in well-rounded. So I'm going to say the science table also costs around 20,000. And so just remembering that if I have some property and equipment that is in that 700 category, then you will be required to do that property and equipment tab up here on the top. So again, until I have this budget within the full amount spent, it won't it won't, I can't, or I guess I can save it. But it is going to tell me, oh, it's going to tell me it's not saved because the indirect costs are still too low. So I've still budgeted 4,000. I'm going to just get rid of my indirect costs and see what happens there. See if that will let me save my budget. Yes, it did. So remembering too that then the next tab is that property and equipment. So if I did have that science table, I'm going to make sure I include that we bought one science table, and I probably need more details if I was buying a $20,000 science table, but for today that's my description. And so I have now saved that page. Pardon me. Sorry about that. I'm out working from home with a barking dog. So I have saved that page to match up with that other page, remembering that I can go back to my program detail and find out, maybe now, since I said I decided to take off indirect, I would put that back to 0. I can figure out some of my calculations if I need it to match up exactly. I have 50,586, so that's a little easier number to remember. But again, the screenshot might help you. You're going to definitely want your, if your clerk is helping you with this page, you can write it down. Like I said, you may want to start with your budget and work and come back to this page. And so your percentages, they can be small amounts. They could be even like 40.225. If you're trying to get, now this, I've gone over here, so it won't work exactly, but you can see, you can change them to decimal amounts, maybe 39.442 or some random amount, if you need to get closer to an exact number. So feel free to play around with that. But right now I'm under 100%, so I don't want to leave that, or it will get angry with me. So I'm going to save page again. All right, so now the main thing is if you have questions on your budgeting page, if you are not the clerk or business manager, check with your clerk or business manager. And if you are the clerk or business manager and the pages are still giving you difficulty, please reach out to Tammy. So you'll get a budget summary that will break down each of the object codes by items and kind of do across. It will tell you that you've spent $23,000 in instruction. And so you can look at well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and effective use of technology. It'll total those up for you down here at the bottom. So right now I have in well-rounded education, 24,000. I have in safe and healthy students, 24,500, and I haven't done any expenditures in effective use of technology. So just want to make sure that each category will be within $1 of what you have on the allowable uses tab. So that's pretty much the Title IV Part A application pages and some of the changes. If you have questions when working on your application, remember there are the instructions available that will talk you through each part. Within each page of the grant application, you might find instructions, especially for the budget detail pages. The object categories and purpose categories and object codes might be helpful to you. If you have any questions there. And so please reach out to Tammy. I'll share my contact information one more time, and I'm happy to help you if you want to do a Zoom or need any questions answered about your application. Thank you.